Hello and welcome along to this new episode of the Edie Extra podcast, the place to be for discussions about sustainable business leadership with sustainable business leaders. And today it's great to be talking about sustainability for SMEs. We often hear about the challenges that SMEs face when trying to implement more sustainable practices, but many of them are overcoming this and taking ambitious action already. Here to walk me through what that looks like in practice, I'm joined on the line by Wendy Whewell, who is Head of Sustainable Solutions and Finance within Corporate and Commercial Banking at Santander, and also Tom Eisler, Associate Director of Innovation and Sustainability at Baxter Freight. So thank you both so much for your time. How are you both doing?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here.
And me really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you both for taking the time. I think introductions are the most obvious place to start. So it would be great to hear a little bit about each of you and your roles and why that overlaps with this topic that we're here to discuss today, sustainability in SMEs.
Definitely. So I'm Wendy Whewell, as you say, Head of Sustainable Solutions and Finance in the Corporate and Commercial Bank at Santander. So our area of the business looks after businesses with turnover greater than 2 million all the way up to about 1 billion. So right in the middle of all of that are the SMEs. They're very important to the bank, and therefore helping them on their sustainability journey is key to ensuring that we have resilient businesses and businesses that really understand the challenges that they are facing at the current time, and helping them to ensure that they can meet their sustainability goals. If we look at where SMEs are across the country, 99% of all UK businesses are SMEs. They account for just over 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the business sector. But importantly, they employ over 16.6 million people and generate £2.8 trillion in turnover. So it's a really important sector that we're here to support.
And Tom, it would be great to hear a little bit about Baxter Freight and your role there.
Definitely, thank you. So Baxter Freight, we're a freight forwarder and have been for 15 years or so. And about 4 of those years ago, I saw an opportunity in the market, learning a little bit more about sustainability to deal with the emissions that customers share between themselves, which is, of course, the supply chain. And through that, educated myself through the Smart Freight Centre, a non-profit in Europe, and then more widely with the Carbon Literacy Project and the teachings of B Corp and different things like that. And through that, we've developed a product called the Sustainable Freight Network, which is something based on evidence-based reporting, inside value chain mitigation, and beyond the value chain mitigation with something that we're really passionate about, which is carbon insetting, book and claim. Why we're in a really good position to help SMEs is that, first of all, we are one. We're only 150 people, and we've got on our own wider ESG journey recently, having our first interview for B Corp only last week. So lots of learning for us over the last 18 months. And as I said at the start, we are sort of the key in understanding that big, scary supply chain emission that maybe the industry has been a little bit hesitant to tackle the last 8 years. And we feel like we've really got a credible solution to deal with it.
Got it. And I'm sure we can dive into some of those supply chain complexities in this episode, Tom. But for now, I think it would be nice to set the scene about why we're meeting and talking. So we're on the line a few weeks after edie and Santander co-hosted a roundtable in central London, convening decision makers at SMEs for a conversation on spotlighting ambitious sustainability action. So Wendy, it would be great to hear a little bit about your takeaways from that, the general mood and focus of that discussion for those who weren't there.
So the purpose of hosting the roundtable was really to understand the challenges and ambitions that businesses have in the SME sector with regards to sustainability. We've done a number of these roundtables, and we always come away uplifted by the great stories that the small businesses tell us, but we also find that exchanging those stories and learnings between each other really drives change. The one that we held with Edie was very uplifting, showed amazing group of businesses around the table who had all chosen to use sustainability as a differentiated factor within their businesses. Now, whether that's looking at their carbon emissions or whether it's looking at the impact of society and social issues with regards to employment in respect of tea or coffee fields, it was a very, very rich discussion. But it also highlighted the importance of how do we come together, how do we collaborate, but some of the other challenges that we still see today. Large corporates are very much driven by need for compliance, need to meet regulations. And whilst they are the ones that have the big sustainability teams, all of that compliance and regulation is trickling down and creating burden for smaller businesses who have got lower number of employees, if any, focused on sustainability. So how do they meet those challenges and how do they move forward on that? So that was the purpose of the discussion. And I think Tom will agree it was a very rich and enlightening discussion.
Well, you've set me up to say that I didn't agree, but of course I agreed. It was really insightful for me, particularly because we've started sort of at the bottom of the rabbit hole in understanding sustainable logistics and all of its aspects. That it's made most apparent going to different events and people still doing spend-based analysis on their logistics when there's been a credible evidence-based solution for some time. But and explaining that is always a gap. But it's also because I don't fully understand, I'm learning more about the other pressures within ESG, and only by understanding all three can you actually impact one, is what I'm starting to learn. And when you talk about the societal impacts, Wendy, I took a lot from that, and it's almost understanding not only the accreditation pressure, but also the breadth of the task of which sustainability is for an SME. It's not just even just working out your start of the carbon footprint is difficult, but then we do have to think about the governance and the social as well. And it's even a thing that how I position kind of targeting customers in that way, because I understand that the budget on this other side of the table with the SME, it has to be proportioned to maybe at first if it is working out the scope 1, 2 and 3, but then they'll be thinking about the accreditation costs, they'll be thinking about whatever things are necessary. Like even in our journey, we've had to sacrifice some of our profits to go to different things and you know, free breakfasts on Fridays and gym subsidies and different things like that. So it just kind of brought home how large the picture is. It's not just carbon emissions, it's not just supply chain, it's such a big thing.
Got it. And I think I've seen over the past few years so many surveys and headlines about how daunting this is. As you mentioned, Tom, so much about how this can be a challenge, about higher costs, more compliance requirements, lack of in-house expertise. But I wanted to focus on whether people are now seeing the opportunity piece and starting to measure that a bit better. So over the last year especially, we've heard about the increasing recognition of sustainability as resilience, as risk management, as value creation, rather than something that businesses can just put on the side. So are we in a new era of recognising opportunities for SMEs? And if we're not quite there, how can we get there, do you think?
I mean, the timeline of sustainability in my mind has been sort of a space 2015 to 2020 of accreditations being created, B Corp, SBTI, or certainly being recognised more greatly, EcoVadis, things like that. And then, yes, the large companies had the many ears and many academic abilities and consultancy services to create something there and make worth. But I think there has been a bit of a green wall kind of built around that's very hard to penetrate for an SME, mostly because of the jargon alone and the fear of acting. When you hear like the big kind of greenwash scandals and that, is this the right thing to do? So that it's a fear to act in the first place because of all those things. But certainly now, as an anecdote of my space, I'm as a project that we do for inside the value chain, we talk about putting biofuels, so HVO, into haulage yards for them to use that as a 90% reduction on a diesel alternative. It's really good because, you know, the fuel goes directly into the existing infrastructure, the existing vehicles, instead of having to do that kind of £250,000 investment into an EV. And that was the kind of the sell to hauliers and to customers at the time. But then in light of the recent oil shock and talk about resilience in the supply chain, if you diversify the fuel just away from oil into HVO, then suddenly you don't have to worry as much as we have had to do recently with the fuel surcharge. Customers on the shelves at the end of the fast moving goods cycle or something like that, they may not see the fuel surcharge on their peanut butter or something like that, but right now that is happening. And for us, we're having to do a fuel surcharge, and from our hauliers, that has to go all the way down the supply chain. And that could have been mitigated if a more sustainable approach was taken at the start, and we thought about that biofuel earlier.
Got it. And yeah, Wendy, what are you seeing as the sell or the opportunity, and are we getting that story across at the moment? And if not, what is the role of banks and financial services in getting us to that point with SMEs?
I think it's a great point that Tom's making at the present time as to, if you look at where SMEs are currently, they have got so many challenges in front of them, whether it's the impact of COVID or Brexit or interest rates, inflation. It felt just before the Gulf War that we were actually starting to see an improvement in the economy. And now we're the 5th week into the Gulf War, and we're seeing incredible price hikes in respect of diesel and petrol, and therefore that's going to have an impact on all businesses, even if they don't actually transport goods. Just getting to and from your place of work is going to be a challenge for some of your employees. So I think it's a case of actually thinking about, to Tom's point about the language, ESG, sustainability, what do they actually mean? If we talk about risks and opportunities, and to that key point about resilience, then that breaks it down into a language that's more familiar with people, and it takes away a lot of connotations around it, given the current climate that we're in. And you start thinking as to what can we actually do to support. And I think it's identifying where those risks are, what's the biggest challenge that those SMEs are facing, and what can they do to mitigate those risks, and actually does that create an opportunity? And I think the majority of these actually do create opportunities. So to Tom's point, high energy costs, high fuel costs, what are the alternatives out there? In logistics, it's not going to necessarily be an HV vehicle that's actually got a long waiting time. I understand it could be up to 3 years. It's extremely expensive. But if there's an opportunity to use a different type of fuel, then that's going to be quite incredible to do so. At the times that we've seen previous energy costs, a lot of businesses have actually just worked out, how can we change the way that we deliver our goods? How can we change the travel route? All of those sort of things, quick wins that can make a big difference. So it's actually thinking about them, taking each one at a time and working out what's the opportunity here that we can actually do to mitigate this risk. And it's trying to make it into as simple language as possible, and to take away the scariness of saying this is how you go about calculating scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. Actually, this is just actually thinking about how can we reduce our carbon footprint and therefore make a difference.
And I think I want to stay on that language piece and getting people on the same page. And you've both talked about the real importance of getting the right words and the right framing across to SMEs. But of course, no SME can do things alone. They'll be working up and down the value chain and across the sector. So I wanted to get your view on how we can really align expectations to get things moving at the right pace across a value chain. I think you alluded to, Tom, that big businesses are now speaking the sort of language of compliance and might even be speaking a different language when they come to the SMEs and their supply chain.
I think the worlds have gone so far apart now, it's quite hard to compare them. In my opinion, it's almost a bit of there's better use of time in terms of the impact that we can have than trying to take an SME up that journey that has happened with the bigger companies and getting all of their accreditations in order. I think, again, anecdotally with us as a freight forwarder, there's a really cool opportunity for a freight forwarder at the minute, because we can specialize in this subject, and we can then be the conduit either side of however impact we can have. An example of that in our book and claim. So book and claim carbon insetting being, instead of carbon credits attributing to climate-based projects like a tree reforestation project or something like that, we associate ourselves with different sustainable logistics projects around the world. And why we like that is because it's quite a full solution in the sense that we can work out how much carbon has been produced on the flight, and then we can invest in the production of sustainable air fuel in a project around the world. Our project of that is in Japan. It's in Tokyo, and those flights go from Tokyo to Heathrow. How to communicate to hauliers in the UK that they can register themselves on a carbon registry that would generate a carbon credit that's verified by the evidence-based approved certification called GLEC that is based somewhere by the smart freight. All of that information isn't useful, but when we talk directly to them about how they can make their fuel go further, how they can have a different revenue stream, then all of that makes sense. And then suddenly they're on the same platform in a road application rather than the air application as a giant Japanese company that has recognized the same steps of recognizing sustainability, sustainable air fuel as an extra revenue stream, as something generally done for the good. And I've talked to a 10-person haulier in Nottingham and got them on the same platform for road credits instead of air credits. So I think it's knowing who you're talking to, and there being absolutely a space in the market for someone to translate those two worlds, because they do need to talk. We can't have it that that they both just exist independent. There needs to be some interaction, and I think there needs to be people that bridges that gap.
It's such an interesting case study, Tom, and I think that one of the things that came out of the roundtable was that need for collaboration, and there being a strong focus on, as you say, shared supply and value chains. I think I heard someone describe it once as compete on the shelves but collaborate in the supply chain. But the word collaboration is really bandied around a lot, and sometimes people have a collaborative partnership that is just a few meetings and fizzles out. So I wanted to get your views on how we can get beyond collaboration for the sake of it and drive that meaningful change that we desperately need to see across the supply chains, or else businesses won't hit their ambitions. So Wendy, perhaps I can come to you first on this one.
So I think that's an interesting point that you make as to whether it's a one-off collaboration or whether it's an ongoing collaboration. I think we found just with the roundtables, by bringing businesses that have started the journey and those businesses who've been putting it off or just haven't got the bandwidth or don't know where to start, by sharing best practice and sharing the stories as to what's gone well and what hasn't gone well, just that one round table can really change people's perceptions and actually take the opportunity to move forward, and especially if they can learn from other people's failures so they're not continuing to repeat those failures. I think one-off collaboration can be very, very good. The other side of it that's really key for me, and if we say take Tom's business with regards to freight forwarding, wouldn't it be wonderful if one of Tom's clients comes in and says, I'm going to bring the whole of my supply chain in, and we're going to discuss the key role that logistics plays in every part of that supply chain. Whether it's down to whoever makes the large engine, down to whoever makes the widget that goes into that large engine, you take everybody on the same journey. People learn together, they talk the same language, but most importantly, you're never doing something to somebody or telling a business, you've got to do this because if we don't, we will not win the contract, or we won't be compliant. By working with everybody together, you can get some really quick wins. And we know, when you bring a group of colleagues together, especially if you go across seniority, the blue sky thinking that can come out of all of this is really, really strong. And if I give you an anecdotal one that, learning just from one of my clients who said that they learned from their bakers about some habits that they used to turn the ovens on for 3 hours before they started baking, because somebody had forgotten to tell them that the new ovens only need half an hour to heat up. But once they did that one piece, they suddenly learnt that the rest of the workforce had got some great ideas as to other things that the business could do. So collaboration needn't be externally, it can certainly be internally, but I think it really makes a difference, and it's key if we want to act quickly and make a big difference.
Yeah, I just to follow on a little bit from that point, in my own experience, but also just a thought that I took from the roundtable, in particular of hearing the stories there. I think there's an opportunity. Yes, the massive corporations have got all the badges and the labels, and that looks brilliant, and there's great work, and the frameworks do really work. But they're not nimble, they're not nifty. They can't act in a way that would make impact today, for instance. And you find that mostly with SMEs, and that's how we've gone through our B Corp journey relatively quickly, and that's how we identify as a company that they've worked out how to grow rice hydroponically, and sustainability is their big thing, and rice produces the third largest amount of methane or something in the world, something like that. So their whole thing is they've done this, they've cracked that. So talking to a small company, and there are only like 10 people in their organization, about that and how quickly they can get, and talk about internal collaboration as well, quickly can get the head of sustainability in the room and the head of logistics in the room, and then talk to us who's equally as nimble and nifty, then you can get something quite impactful going. A big problem for us in the cell, and we took this from edie 26 actually, of finally getting to talk directly to the heads of sustainability. We have a team of 40 sales staff, and their goal with the product that I talk about, the Sustainable Freight Network, is just to somehow ring some bells of the logistics manager about the stuff that we talk about enough so that they go and get the sustainability manager, and I can have a meeting with all three of them. And that's how the collaboration internally comes to life, because the motives and the reasons why are suddenly all aligned, when the sustainability manager and logistics manager are talking to each other and saying, oh yeah, we both could have a massive impact here if what it comes down to is combine their budgets.
And I think another point on this, Sarah, is actually if we had to get to a circular economy, then, looking at how you produce your product all the way to how you dispose of it, you need everybody in the room to be able to think about the cradle to grave proposition and how you're going to reduce and recycle it, and who's going to do what and how you can do it. If you try to do it individually and in silos, it's just not going to work. So I think that ability to really collaborate, make a difference, is really key. And just one final point, last year I spent quite a bit with the Institute of Positive Fashion, and the number of SMEs in the fashion sector that are really dependent on actually that collaboration to be able to make that difference. So I think it's very, very key.
Yeah, it's great to hear of so many examples from you both of where people have gotten together and have just made this click and it's fallen into place. But I'm sure we'll have people that are listening and thinking that all sounds really nice, but I'm totally bogged down in compliance. I'm trying to accredit. I'm trying to manage crisis after crisis here. So I'd love to get your thoughts on essentially what you tell these people, how we get past this burden mindset.
Certainly, I think it's about understanding where you are as a company, and I think assessing the appetite, the nimbleness, and the priority. So I understand. I've kind of gone full circle with the whole accreditation piece at the minute. It's kind of like, yes, the framework's brilliant, but I think we've gone as an industry, we've taken too long with what accreditation we need to be going for, and also how long it takes to go there, and also how expensive it potentially is to go do these things. It's quite hard, these things need to be accessible, and how hard they are to understand in the jargon way, but also then how hard they are to kind of get budget towards to go to them. It's a little bit contradictory. What I was talking about at my presentation at edie 26 was about, can we maybe rethink what we're prioritizing here? Our impact and the actions we do should get the accreditation, instead of trying to find a way to get. It's a little bit in the inverse in some way, I feel, at the minute. There's the fact that I've kind of quoted at the end of my presentation at edie 26 was that 48% of the businesses in the UK have a net zero strategy for all three scopes by 2035. And I would seemingly put myself of some level of expertise within the largest part of that carbon footprint within the supply chain for those customers. And I'm teaching everyone about the different ways of how to reduce that. I can't deliver zero emission supply chains yet. So I that kind of gap, we've got 9 years supposedly for 48% of the market to reach net zero on a topic that I don't think can reach net zero. So it's an example of, I think the accreditation has almost gone too far, and we need to be kind of not worrying about it as much, because there is a space for it, but we need to be thinking about what impact can I have right now. And there is really, especially where I'm sitting in logistics, there's some great stuff that people can access today.
I think this is a case of looking at resilience at the present time. Compliance and certification could be, compliance being the stick, certification could be the carrot. But actually, as you say, Sarah, it's the 5th week of the Gulf War. People are really concerned about energy costs and about, is their business going to be able to meet the wages at the end of the week, etc. So actually, what is the key area that they have got a big focus with regards to the goods that they're supplying? What impacts, if they put a resilience lens on, a sustainability lens, can they actually make a difference? So is it thinking about, do they reduce the mileage that they do? Do they think about different ways that they can send their goods? Do they think about, is there a way to get renewables? How can they look at all of the equipment that they've got in their businesses, putting some sensors on the plant and machinery to look at which is the one that consumes the most energy? Do they speak with regards to a renewables tariff, or even putting some renewables on? They're all things that they can consider. All banks are here to help. You know, as I have a really important motto, there is no such thing as a stupid question. You know, some of them are the most insightful questions that you can get. But this is a challenging area at the time, and businesses are rightly quite worried about where their businesses are going. But I think some of the risks that they're facing, they can actually look into it and actually see that as an opportunity. And, you know, there's various reports, whether it's our research that we have done, UK Finance have done research for SMEs, there's the Whewell Review, and that people who've actually looked at sustainability and what they can do have actually found that they've reduced costs, they've improved their customer base, they've certainly improved their purpose with their workforce. So they all actually create these great opportunities, and it's thinking about what can they do. And if they haven't got the headspace at the present time, just think about something small. What one small thing can people do in their business that could make a difference? And it could be changing how they recycle their waste. It could be, you know, how much water they utilize, getting an audit done. We've got some propositions out there in Santander that are there to help our clients on that journey. So just reach out and ask for help, whether it's through yourselves listening to numerous podcasts or speaking to your freight forwarder, speaking to your bank. So if you're working with a large corporate, speak to them, ask them for help on that journey. I would say this is not about being brave. This is about having some courage to effect change, and, you know, finding somebody who's done something and working on it, and just take that first step forward.
Absolutely. When I was just thinking of a takeaway, I think it would be to go on a little bit from what Wendy was saying, is what is that small thing you can do today, but what is that thing that's slightly a bit bigger that you can't do on your own, and then go find that person, whether it be internally or externally, to make that thing happen. And that's how the snowball really grows.
Brilliant. So I think a fair few great takeaways to take away there. We've covered everything in this episode, from the pros and cons of accreditation to industry forums to a bit of the nitty-gritty of carbon accounting. So it's been an absolute pleasure to host this episode of ED Extra. That is all the time we have on the discussion today, but I'm sure that Wendy or Tom would be happy to be found on LinkedIn to carry the conversation on if you're listening and want to get in touch. But for today's episode, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Wendy, too.
Thank you for inviting us.